Louisville, Kentucky, 1981. John Candy stood on set in the Toy Tiger Club, dressed in his underwear, up to his knees in mud. Surrounded by dozens of crew members and 100 extras, John had a strange feeling in his gut. It wasn't butterflies, but instead a sinking feeling. He had been dreading this day for weeks, and tried to convince his director Ivan Reitman to reconceive what was to be his big scene in the film, but to no avail. Reitman remained undeterred. Stripes was initially conceived as a film for the comedy duo Cheech and Chong, a kind of Cheech and Chong joined the army. But when approached, the team's management wanted complete creative control over the project. So Reitman and his writers retooled the idea as a starring vehicle for John's old Second City buddies Bill Murray and Harold Ramis. In the film, Murray and Ramis play a couple of hapless losers who decide to enlist in the army as a means to shake up their lives. Once in basic training, they find themselves as the de facto leaders of a group of misfit recruits. John had scored himself a juicy role among those misfits.
My name's Dewey Oxburger. My friends call me Ox. You might have noticed I've got a slight weight problem.
No.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do.
In terms of scale, Stripes didn't compare to John's previous films, 1941 or The Blues Brothers. It was a modest comedy with a budget of just $10 million. And Reitman, who had grown up in Canada and started his career producing micro-budget genre pictures, like David Cronenberg's Shivers, and his own horror comedy, Cannibal Girls, was not cut from the same cloth as a Spielberg or a Landis. He was a figures guy, and made pictures on time and on budget. To him, there was nothing funny about a 20-car pileup if it added $100,000 to your bottom line. For Reitman, filmmaking was about putting funny people in a room together and letting them cook. And Stripes is nothing if not a film blessed with talent, with a script by Ramis and the writers of Meatballs, and a supporting cast that included John Larroquette, Sean Young, Judge Reinhold, and Joe Flaherty, among others. And in this regard, it was a much better vehicle for John Candy, as there was no risk of being lost among a sea of extras and special effects explosions. But his big scene, the one he'd been dreading since signing on to the picture, would require him to wrestle in the mud with half a dozen scantily clad women.
My big man here is going to do it all for us for $413.50.
Despite having his buddy from Chicago in his corner, and the color commentary supplied by an SCTV compatriot, John felt incredibly vulnerable in doing this scene. At first, he tosses the women around the ring, knocking them down into the mud. They then overpower him, wrestling John to the ground. Dressed in skimpy bikinis, the women climb all over him, pushing his face into the mud. It's all played for laughs, but John hated doing it. He was a married man and a father, but also he was self-conscious about his appearance. And rolling around in the mud, in his clinging underwear, what would people think? But it was also one of the major set pieces of the film. After most shoot days, John would invite the cast back to his room for drinks. But Stripes was shooting in a dry county, a concept that at first, John just couldn't quite grasp.
What do you mean there's no booze? What about beer? Beer's not booze.
It was a problem that John quickly remedied by sending teamsters to neighboring counties to stock up on beer. He then rented an adjoining room in the hotel, which would be the party room, and its bathtub was always kept stocked full of Molson on ice. That night after the shoot, John took an extra long shower, taking great care to clean the mud from every nook and cranny. But after 3 days shooting the mud wrestling scene, it was near impossible to get clean. As the party was dying down, John retired to his room and placed a late-night call to his friend and SCTV director, George Bloomfield, back in Toronto. John talked to George about how the shoot went, and his fears about the scene. He told George that he couldn't help but feel degraded.
What if people just watch this scene and see a fat pig rolling in the mud?
John worried aloud. And sadly, he had good reason to.
What kind of man wears stripes?
Got something in a low-rise bikini?
A real man who can fight his way out of anything. A leader of men. A follower of women.
You can't go!
A tough guy with a soft heart and an even softer head.
Just wish I hadn't drunk all that cough syrup.
Bill Murray in Stripes, rated R. Starts Friday at a theater near you.
When Stripes came out the following year, it was a hit. Reitman had turned his $10 million comedy into an $85 million blockbuster, and it would go on to be the fifth highest grossing film of 1981.
Stripes is a real breakthrough for Bill Murray, who had a big hit called Meatballs that really didn't do justice to his talent a couple of years ago, but this one does. And Murray is surrounded by a cast of great improvisational character actors, people who can somehow preserve the dramatic impact of a scene, even while they're going for the big laugh, and there are a lot of big laughs in Stripes.
In the wake of the release of Stripes, John got a lot of attention for his role as Ox. However, the reviews managed to be both positive and unflattering in the same breath. In its review of the film, Variety wrote, "Ramus and the obese John Candy are wildly funny," while the Washington Post low-lighted the mud wrestling scene in its review, going as far as to call John porky. And then there was the press tour in which John had to entertain questions like,
I wondered, as a matter of fact, if there was indeed a lean John Candy, would that...
There is, I guess, you know.
But would that harm your career as in comedy?
which John handled affably, while outlining for the interviewer his upcoming diet regimen.
Class that takes place at my house. I have this instructor.
In many
that comes to
ways,
the house.
Stripes changed the way people saw John Candy, while it emboldened journalists to inquire about his body, something that would always cause him discomfort, though he rarely betrayed these thoughts in his outward reactions to such lines of questioning. Stripes also did something else for John. It demonstrated his potential as a reliable presence on the silver screen. From Knockabout Media, I'm Ryan Barnett, and this is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood North, taking you behind the scenes of your favorite CanCon. This season, we're following the life and career of John Candy. In our last episode, Saturday Night Live debuted and made a number of John's friends household names overnight. Second City Toronto developed their own sketch show, and with SCTV on the air, John started to finally get some real notice, and doors started to open for him. Today, we're looking at John's early career in Hollywood. This is episode 4, Bigger Fish. Los Angeles, 1982. John Candy sat on the set of The Mike Douglas Show. However, sitting opposite John was not Mike, but his old co-star from Big City Comedy, Fred Willard.
One week. How many did you do? 13 in all?
13 shows.
And I was his co-host for one of the shows. Did you get a lot of response from the show I was on?
Not a lot, no. They canceled it right after that, really. That was the 13th show. And
Yeah.
I don't blame you.
No.
I don't blame you.
Big City Comedy, a sketch series devised as a star vehicle for John, had come and gone in the fall of 1980. It wasn't a fiasco by any stretch, but the show's failure was an embarrassment.
No, neither
It was a
was.
good show.
It was. But it just went down into the tube.
It hit pretty quick.
In some part, big or small, Big City Comedy had been John's way of thumbing his nose as SCTV executive producer Andrew Alexander, following a pay dispute. John often felt that Alexander didn't value the comedy talent he employed, something that was confirmed for him when he learned that he earned less for the show than some of his other castmates.
And people were amazed that you came back from that carnage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I got drinking pretty heavy right after that.
Because a lot of blame was right on your
It
shoulders,
was all on
too.
my shoulders
Yeah.
there for a while.
But I think it's a salute to
John
this
bounced
man
from
that
that
he
gig
came
to his
back
role in
from
Stripes.
something like that.
But something else had happened between the cancellation of Big City Comedy and the release of that film. John made amends with Andrew Alexander. At the time, SNL was rebuilding following the departure of its original cast, writers, and producer Lorne Michaels. In its 1980-81 season, the first with a new cast of not ready for primetime players, was mercifully cut short by a writer's strike. The show was on the precipice of a cancellation when Dick Ebersol, SNL's executive producer, cleaned house and set his sights on the cast of SCTV, John included, to join the show. Meanwhile, Andrew Alexander was doing his own deal with NBC, hoping to convince the network to outright replace SNL with his SCTV. And this all happened more or less in plain view of the trades. John would even be asked by journalists whether or not he would be joining SNL or returning to SCTV. In the end, NBC opted to renew SNL for another season, but offered Alexander the post-SNL time slot for a 90-minute version of his show, which would officially be retitled SCTV Network 90. This new deal with NBC would also see a bump in the show's budget, now at $475,000 an episode, a big leap from its $35,000 show first season. With a promise of royalties participation and an American broadcast deal, John opted to return to his old show and once again work with his old friends Eugene Levy, Catherine O'Hara, Joe Flaherty, Dave Thomas, and Andrea Martin. And also on the show that season was Rick Moranis, the only member of SCTV not to come from the stage company. During John's absence from the show, production had moved from Toronto to Edmonton, about as far away from show business as humanly possible, while still remaining on the continent. When SCTV was in production, it was full on. The cast would come together for concentrated writing periods that would be quite grueling, and production was no different. From an SCTV anniversary panel, this is Rick Moranis remembering those days in Edmonton.
Well, in Edmonton, as I said, we had no other life. There was the show, and it was 7 days a week, except Sunday afternoons if Pittsburgh was playing in a football game, then we had to shut down.
For this reason, John and his wife Rose made the decision that, this time, she would stay home with baby Jennifer, while he worked on the show 3,000 kilometers away. John would later say in an interview with entertainment journalist Bobby Wygant,
She's 20 months now. She's starting to talk, and she's doing great.
And when she sees you on television, what does she do? Got that all figured out?
She looks at me, Daddy. She plays games with me on TV if I'm on. She'll put a blanket in front of her face and drop it. It's sad when I'm not there and she does it to a picture. You know, my wife caught her playing in my office, playing with my picture, like playing peekaboo with a picture. I'm like, oh, God, I don't want to go home. I don't want to be in Edmonton.
The reconciliation between John and Andrea Alexander was reportedly a shaky one during that fourth season of the show. John continued to keep a vigilant eye on not just how he was treated, but also how the show treated those around him, especially when it came to money matters. In his biography on John Candy, journalist Martin Nelman recounts one incident in which, during a late-night writing session, one of many to be sure, production brought in Swiss Chalet for dinner.
You may have heard some juicy rumors about Swiss Chalet.
John spared no expense in matters of dining. And I want to be clear, this isn't a dig at John's weight, but a defense of the way he lived his life and showed his love to others. Years later, Eugene Levy would tell People magazine that John was always most relaxed when he was cooking. In fact, Levy is quoted as saying, he was so relaxed that come 10 o'clock, you'd realize John was just putting the turkey in the oven. You'd eat at 2 a.m., leave at 5 a.m., and later you'd realize that it was one of the greatest nights you'd ever had. Food and drink were among John Candy's love languages. So to be served a quarter chicken dinner while they were all busting their humps to make the show? Well, he felt this was an affront to the entire group. John picked up his tin takeout tray.
And this is where this goes.
And he threw it like a football across the room and against the wall.
You never had it so good. Those juicy rumors are all true. So good for so little.
From an interview with David Letterman.
Tell me about doing the show from Edmonton. Is this
Well,
the last cycle of shows came out of there?
Yeah, we're notorious for selling out to the lowest bidder, you know? We ended up there.
Now, how does that happen?
No.
This is a major network television extravaganza, and they're doing it in Edmonton. How did it end up there, and what was it like doing it there?
Our show's like the movie The Producers.
Kind of a tax deal?
Number of stuff. All right, I'm being bitter. Didn't come through with that per diem.
SCTV Network 90 premiered in May of 1981. In the end, it aired in the 12:30 a.m. time slot Friday nights on NBC, leading to promos like this.
If you can't stay up for SCTV, wake up for SCTV!
That fourth season started off slow, as SCTV recycled material to help fill the new 90-minute time slot. But mid-season, in the summer of 1981, they picked up a creative head of steam. Johnny LaRue, Candy's most famous character, returned to the show for a season-long story arc. That year, John would also play Dr. Tongue, Mr. Mambo, Curly Howard, and Jake LaMotta in a parody commercial for Raging Bull BQ.
Nothing beats the taste of succulent barbecue ribs. Especially when we fix them here in my place. Jake LaMotta's Raging Barbecue. We got all kinds of great barbecue delicacies. Chicken, shrimp, linguine...
The following year, John and the rest of the SCTV folks found themselves at the Primetime Emmy Awards with 7 nominations for the show. John, along with his cast members and writers, occupied 4 out of the 5 nominations for Outstanding Writing in a Variety or Music Program. So it was of little surprise when Milton Berle announced,
For Outstanding Writing in a Variety or Musical Program, the winner is the Moral Majority Show of SCTV Network.
As John and his SCTV compatriots filled the stage, Earl read out all 18 names of the winners. Joe Flaherty then took the mic as spokesman for the show.
I can't believe that we got something up here bigger than the cast of Hill Street Blues, which we've done on our show. All right, I'd like to...
They would win again the following year, this time earning all 5 nominations in the writing category, shutting out SNL, which had finally found its legs thanks to a 21-year-old Eddie Murphy. John's gamble in returning to SCTV was paying off.
I've left the show already.
Have you?
John joked with Fred Willard.
I've learned what it's like on my own. No, I'm staying in the security of Second City. I like the womb.
But you again have turned like Phoenix rising from its ashes.
So to speak, yes.
You're back again. You got up off the canvas and you're back again and you're doing another film.
Well, this one, it's, well, there's many titles for it, Fred. Again, we're not sure exactly how it's going to go. Drums Over Malta was one of them.
Oh, yeah.
Banana Soup is what they're thinking of now.
John said with a grimace and a smile.
And I mean that in a good sense.
Okay.
Drums Over Malta started with a script written by Candy, Eugene Levy, Joe and Paul Flaherty, and fellow SCTV writer Dick Blasucci. The film was to star John, Joe, and Eugene, and be directed by John's old boss, comedian David Steinberg. It was reportedly to be a parody of Alfred Hitchcock's North by Northwest, a kind of screwball comedy about an innocent man wrongly accused. However, during the development of Drums Over Malta, the film Hanky Panky starring Gene Wilder and Gilda Radner was released by Columbia Pictures, and had a very similar premise. So midstream, the producers decided to retool the script. According to director David Steinberg, John was supposed to rewrite the script, but, and I quote, "If you knew John, you know it was like kicking a boulder up a big hill for him." So, they improvised their way through much of it, and called it Going Berserk.
Be on the lookout for this man. He's been linked to dangerous convicts.
What are you doing here? I set fire to my family.
He's a handcuffed, hardened criminal.
Please, I don't want to go with you.
John Candy is John Bourguignon. He's the most wanted man in America. And he was last seen going berserk. Going Berserk, rated R.
Now playing at Hollywood Pacific UA Cinema Center.
According to all involved, the final film bears little resemblance to the original script for Drums Over Malta. It credits just 2 screenwriters, Steinberg and Dana Olson. At one point, Levy even wanted to quit the film, sensing an impending disaster, but ultimately decided not to break his contract. For John, the film marked his first starring role. His name was even above the title on the poster. So it was a little demoralizing when Universal Studios, the film's distributor, decided to dump the movie in theaters. Nevertheless, Steinberg would do his best to promote it. This is him on The Tonight Show in November of 1983.
What do you want to talk about first? You got a movie you want to talk?
Yes, Going Berserk. John Candy is in it, and all the SCTV guys, Joe Flaherty, Gene Levy. I think it's very funny, and it should be around the country.
Around the country.
Universal has released it in a sort of whispering campaign. You have to ask your neighbor, did you ever hear of Going Berserk? Is it out? Yes, it's been out for a few weeks.
Going Berserk could have spelled career disaster for John. Like Big City Comedy, he was the face of the project.
Because a lot of blame was right on your shoulders,
It was all on my
too.
shoulders there for a while.
But luckily, he had earned himself a get-out-of-jail-free card earlier that year by popping up in a memorable role in one of the biggest films of 1983.
Sorry, folks, park's closed. The moose out front should have told you.
When it went to camera in the summer of 1982, National Lampoon's Vacation had a very different ending than the film we know today. Based on the short story Vacation 58, written by John Hughes, the film follows the misadventures of the Griswold family as they embark on a cross-country trip to the fictional theme park, Wally World. Vacation, which starred Chevy Chase, was being directed by John Candy's old SCTV buddy Harold Ramis. In the script, when Clark and his family finally reach Wally World, only to discover that it's closed, they drive to the house of Roy Wally, a fictionalized Walt Disney stand-in, and hold him hostage until he and his business associates put on an impromptu pantomime for the family. When the film was screened for test audiences,
for 80 minutes, the audience was hysterical, loved every minute of the first 80 minutes.
This is the film's director, Harold Ramis.
Then we got to the ending, and it's like, last last 20 minutes, not a single laugh. People came out like, that was not very funny ending.
The team behind Vacation knew they had a problem. They needed a new ending. The Griswolds, and thus the audience, had to see Wally World. After all, the whole movie had been building to it. It would be like watching The Third Man and never having Orson Welles appear as Harry Lime. So screenwriter John Hughes wrote a new ending, in which the family would force their way into the park by taking a security guard hostage, thus completing their 2,000-mile odyssey. Years later, Ramis would recall the process of retooling that ending.
And I knew exactly who should play the security guard because John Candy used to do a character on SCTV named Paul Fist in Your Face. You talk like the guy in the movie, very earnest and very serious.
The new ending was shot over 4 days at Magic Mountain in Valencia, California, mere months before its July release date.
This summer, when you think vacation, think National Lampoon's Vacation. See the real America.
Hey, underpants. Hey, yellow.
It's friendly.
I'm okay. I'm okay.
Don't you want to look at the Grand Canyon?
It's educational.
Great.
And most of all, it's fun.
The dog went on the picnic basket.
Let Chevy Chase, Beverly D'Angelo, Imogene Coca, Randy Quaid, John Candy, and Christy Brinkley.
Well, are you gonna go for it?
This is crazy. This is crazy. This is crazy.
Take you for a ride. This summer, when you think vacation, think National Lampoon's Vacation.
I'm gonna check under the hood.
Queensville, Ontario. John Candy stood in the yard of his family's 10-acre farm. As Rose and Jen sat inside watching the Muppet movie for the umpteenth time, John had decided to take a stroll around his property. He and Rose had bought the farm just the previous year, almost on a whim. John had spotted it while flipping through the Toronto real estate ads.
Rose! I got it! I found the dream house!
That day, John drove in a snowstorm to see the place and paid asking price for it on the spot. He didn't even bother to go through an agent. That was in the winter. Come the following summer, as the Candy family settled into their new home, they made a discovery.
Turned out I got swamp property.
John would later explain during an appearance on The Late Show with David Letterman.
I learned about water tables.
I know nothing about
We're
water
on a
tables.
real high one. Our house is here and the water's up here.
Yeah.
And it wants to get over there.
Soon after moving in, they had to have the whole property trenched, diverting the water away from the house. That morning, as John and his yellow lab, Kima, walked the property, he could see that the grass on his lawn was now turning a pale brown. John took a drag off his cigarette. He'd have to, again, call some guy to come have a look at the grass. He didn't get home a lot these days, and it seemed that this property itself was determined to keep him away even longer.
It's actually every movie I do kind of pays for another stone.
So
The farm, Rose and Jennifer, they kept John grounded. He had seen how fame could affect a person.
Good evening, I'm Marty McNeely for WGN News. Comic actor John Belushi died today at a rented hotel bungalow in the Hollywood Hills.
The recent overdose death of John Belushi had been a sobering slap in the face for their entire circle of friends. Candy had attended Belushi's funeral and offered support to his widow, Judy. For John, the passing of Belushi put into stark relief the two paths laid before him. While he built his career, he could indulge in the excesses of Hollywood, but it would probably kill him. His father's death at 35 was never far from his mind. And now that he was a father and 32 himself, well, John took one last drag off his cigarette. He then went into the house to pull Jennifer away from Kermit and Miss Piggy. He had just bought a tractor, an old 1947 Massey Harris, fire engine red with yellow wheel rims. He had bought it with the intent to plow the back field, but today, he and Jennifer were going to take it for a spin. Los Angeles, 1983. Following its Emmy-winning 5th season, NBC canceled SCTV. This led to the show moving to Cinemax, a fairly new maxi-pay cable channel that showed movies uninterrupted. Certainly not the showcase that network television offered, even relegated as SCTV was to a 12:30 a.m. time slot. With all the changes at the show, John chose to leave. He had bigger fish to fry. That morning, as his town car made its way to the set of his new film, John was in a panic. John was in LA that spring shooting Splash, a new comedy for Disney. Starring Tom Hanks and Daryl Hannah, the film was about a man who falls in love with a mysterious woman, only to later learn that she's actually a mermaid. It's part romantic comedy, part fish out of water story. John was cast to play Hanks' sleazy brother Freddie, a role very much in the frequency of his character, Johnny LaRue. As his car raced to set, all John could think was that he was disappointing his director, Ron Howard. At the time, Ron Howard wasn't Academy Award-winning director Ron Howard. While he was coming off a hit at the time with 1982's Night Shift, Splash was only Howard's third feature film. But to John, his director was already totemic. When he and his SCTV brother Eugene Levy were cast in Splash, they couldn't believe that they'd be working with little Ronnie Howard, star of The Andy Griffith Show. They were both huge fans. John had spent his adolescence plunked on the living room floor of his home on Woodville Avenue, watching his new director grow up on TV as Opie Taylor, America's son.
What it is, Pa, is that nowadays kids get 75 cents a week allowance instead of 25 cents.
75 cents? That's a lot of money.
And while John and Eugene were gasping for airtime as SCTV was airing just once a month on global stations in Ontario, Howard was being watched by 50 million people weekly, playing Richie Cunningham, the lead of Happy Days. Hell, the guy even appeared in a memorable episode of The Twilight Zone. For John, Ron Howard was part of the firmament. So, to disappoint him and be late, well, he just hoped Howard would grant him forgiveness. John's town car pulled into base camp, and he bounded out and quickly found his director.
Ron!
John, what happened?
Ron! I'm so sorry.
Ron could see that John was flustered, and had already spent the morning beating himself up.
Yeah, it's all right, John. You were late. It's all right. Let's just let's get you into makeup.
No, you don't understand. I'm drunk.
John then went into his story from the night before. He had been out and run into Jack Nicholson.
Cuckoo's Nest, 5 Easy Pieces, The Last Detail, King Marvin, Gardens, The Shining.
The King of Hollywood.
And he knew my name, Ron. Jack Nicholson knew my name.
John explained that he had spent the night with Nicholson as the Oscar winner kept buying him shots of tequila. Drink after drink, he couldn't say no.
I haven't even been to bed.
Howard nodded as he digested the details of John's story. He then put his hand on the actor's shoulder.
I understand.
How could he be mad? If Ron Howard were part of the firmament, Jack Nicholson was God. Howard wasn't sure he wouldn't have done the same thing, put in the position to drink with Jack Nicholson. So, he got John a coffee. He ushered him into makeup and ready to shoot the next scene. Unfortunately for John, the scene required him to play racquetball. Within the hour, he and Tom Hanks were on the court. John was dressed in his velour workout clothes with a cigarette hanging from his mouth.
Oh, God. My heart's beating like a rabbit.
He stumbled around the court, getting pelted with the ball as he and Hanks played the scene. As luck would have it, of all the scenes in the film, it didn't hurt his performance to be hungover. And then came his big moment. John was supposed to serve the ball and take the rebound to his head.
And action.
Howard prepped himself for whatever came next.
You all set?
Yeah. All right, here we go.
John bounced the ball on the court, then hit it with his racket. It ricocheted off the wall and hit him square in the forehead. Everyone stood in shock, even John. He would later recount this moment to Bob Costas.
I didn't realize just how fast those balls move. Yeah, and they hurt, too. But I had this great smile on my face, which you can never see, but that it hit. I was so excited. Then in a split second, I realized I had to fall, otherwise we're going to have to do this again. So I took the hit, and I smiled and dove down. We left early that day. The crew applauded me.
When it was initially being developed, few in the industry believed in Splash. As producer Brian Grazer would recount years later, it was the other mermaid movie. While he was trying to secure financing for his film, he learned that Warren Beatty and Robert Towne, Oscar-winning screenwriter of Chinatown, were also pursuing a mermaid movie. This scared off most of the studios in Hollywood, but he had managed to convince Disney to back the film by saying that they'd make their mermaid picture cheaper and faster, beating the Beatty Town project to movie screens. And they were true to their word. When Splash hit theaters in March of 1984, it was an immediate hit. It opened in 1,000 theaters and took the #1 spot in its first 2 weekends. It would eventually gross $69 million, making it the 11th highest grossing film of the year. 1984 was a big year for comedies, with Ghostbusters, Gremlins, Beverly Hills Cop, Police Academy, and Romancing the Stone all in the top 10. In the press tour for Splash, John's weight would again be top of mind for reporters. In one particularly excruciating interview, John does his best to keep a friendly face, despite the following line of questioning.
How much did you weigh when you were born?
When I was born, I was about 7'6".
Well, you were normal size then.
Oh, excuse me, what am I, abnormal now?
Don't tell me, when did you start carrying this weight?
When?
You know, the funny thing is, back in the early 70s, I would come to Second City in Chicago, and I would watch a young man that I didn't, I'd never really heard of him, and I'd say, who is that? God, he's good. They said, well, that's John Belushi. And you and he, to me, are similar, in the sense that you're big men, but you're also very lithe. You're very light. You know, there's something about you, you can be really, it's not foul. It's not foul, but there's something, it's like seedy. It's seedy. It's weird. You're not a weird person, but somehow when you're
Aren't we in a good mood today, huh?
Yeah, no, I mean that highly complimentary. I love you. I love you. You know, I have loved you for years from afar.
Splash was big for all involved. It was the film that finally helped Ron Howard shed Hollywood's view of him as Opie Cunningham. And it made producer Brian Grazer one of Hollywood's power players. For Disney, it launched their new banner for more adult fare with Touchstone Pictures. It showed Tom Hanks could be a viable romantic lead, a spot he'd occupy for the next 20 years. But in that moment, in 1984, it was perhaps most consequential for the career of John Candy. It was the perfect vehicle for his talents. His performance was universally hailed, even in some middling reviews for the picture. For instance, The Hollywood Reporter singled John out, calling his performance a fully charged delight, comparing him to Michael Keaton in his star-making role in Night Shift. Critic Pauline Kael wrote that John added bounce and imagination to the film, and that he was preposterously lovable in his role as Freddy. Chicago film critics Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert were among those who were underwhelmed by Splash. But even Ebert would say this.
They ought to start right now and remake this movie and do it the way they should have in the first place. And the first thing I would do, I'd keep Daryl Hannah. I thought she was just fine as the mermaid. I'd switch Tom Hanks and John Candy. With John Candy as that guy, can you get a laugh just having him look at her reading The Lobster like that?
Ebert would also praise John in his otherwise 1.5-star review of the film, writing that Candy was a Charles Laughton type who had such a natural charisma that he was funny just standing there. John had showed that he could score in bit parts like those in Stripes and National Lampoon's Vacation, but what Splash did for him was show Hollywood executives that he had mainstream appeal, that the ticket-buying public would pay money to see a John Candy film. Disney was so pleased with him, in fact, and the film's performance, that they immediately signed John to a development deal, promising him a whopping $350,000 for his next film. Finally, John Candy had some clout in town. Next time on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood North.
And joining us in a special edition of the Bud Sports Break in town, some show business stuff. We have actor, comedian, Canadian, and big hockey fan John Candy, and also the movie director John Hughes. Both of these gentlemen are in town directing a film. Tell us something about the film you're shooting in St. Louis.
It's called Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. It stars John and Steve Martin.
Okay. Have you enjoyed your stay in St. Louis, John?
I have. It's been great. Everybody's been real nice to us here. We've been, of course, looking for snow. The movie deals with a snowstorm, and we're here to empty the Zamboni at the end of the game. And anybody who's got any extra snow at home, please send it to us at the production office at the Hilton Hotel.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood North is written and hosted by me, Ryan Barnett, co-produced by Sonia Jamidi, and recorded by Tyler Rauman at the Community Digital Arts Hub. This series features additional voices by Matt Barnett and Sean Quinlan as John Candy. Our series artwork is by Dmitry Bondarenko. If you like our show, I hope you'll consider helping us grow. You could tell a friend who you think might like the series, drop a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, or follow us on your favorite podcast app. Truly, all of these things really help the show get noticed. Also consider following Knockabout Media on Instagram, Blue Sky, or Substack, where we'll be posting additional content for all of our series. Links are in the show notes. And I'll be back in 2 weeks' time with a new episode. But until then, thanks for listening.
A Knockabout Media original. Hold on.